this computer. So welcome to Art 116, the afternoon section. Nice to see all of your, well, there's not smiling faces. It's so hard to greet you guys. I'm gonna put the participants list up here on my screen and push you guys over to the side, but I can see you. There are 6 of us, 5 of you and 1 of me, so this is really good. I have to get the correct roster because I taught the morning class already and you guys are the afternoon class. So Ezra is here, and Gabby is there, and Mary is here, Nick is there, yay, and Skylar has been here like forever. Skylar, Nick, Mary, Gabby, Ezra, and James are all here. Fan-damn-tastic. All right. So as you guys were coming in, you saw me painting on the painting, and I guess I can just pick it up and show you. This is the one I'm working on. This is the one that I'm trying to populate with dots. And God, all of my colors that I bought this time are glossy, and so they want to really reflect a lot of light. I guess I was painting a little bit more with matte colors last year when I did this one. And of course, my colors are slightly different because I chose a different tetrad. So the one that in the hand that I'm wiggling right now was like yellow, red, green, and violet. And this year's one is a double split complement. So I've got yellow, orange, red, orange, and then blue, green, and blue, violet are my 4 colors. It's a double split complement. So it's just a little bit different. It's got a different kind of color cast, different kind of color balance to it. And that is how things can be different depending on the tetrad of colors that you are working with and you select. And I do want you to write down the 4 colors that you have chosen and stick with those. You know, don't be introducing a 5th, 6th, or 7th color into your tetrad because it is a tetrad. It is 4 colors in this color scheme. So having said all that, I am happy to answer any questions, comments, or concerns that you guys might have at this point. And I'm going to kind of continue my little demonstration that I'm doing today. So if you've got anything that is bugging you about getting started with your project, if you haven't been able to get paint or the template or anything, let me know. I did actually write up an assignment for this in coursework. So when you log into coursework in my Laker link, there is now a Tetrad assignment, and copies of the black and white line drawing of this thing are available. If you can't get in here to pick up the ones that I've been putting out on the table, then you can download this and print it out. And if you print it out on cardstock, it's so much easier. If you can obtain some white cardstock, and if cardstock will run through your computer's printer, then that's good, because this thing does want to curl on you when you paint on it. So painting on cardstock keeps it a little bit more, a little bit flatter. This is the one that I'm working on right now, and I do not have this glued down to another piece of Bristol board like this one is. This one is glued down to Bristol board. So this one is 2 layers, 2 thicknesses of material, whereas this is just 1 thickness. So eventually this one is going to get glued down to cardstock too. All right, having said all that, I'm going to get back into the painting stuff.
I had a question.
Mary, what is it, Mary? I see you now.
Thank you for the printout, because I'm out here in the country and I'm just getting, I think I'm supposed to get my cardstock today in the mail. So thank you for putting that up, because I was going to email you about it. But my question was about the definition of plastic color. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. So what does that mean exactly for it to be plastic?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you so much. I'm just going to change my camera angle so that we can talk about that just a little bit more. So plastic color, his theory of plastic color, Cezanne's, is that he could get rid of black and white off of his palette. That painters for 400 years since the Italian Renaissance had been rendering the illusion of three dimensions on a painting by using black and white, using white to create highlights, hot highlights on surfaces where the light is striking it and then reflecting right back to the viewer, and using black in the shadows. And by using the addition of black and white, in Italian, it's chiaro scuro, chiaro meaning light, and scuro meaning to obscure or shadow. Our English word obscure comes from the Italian scuro. So anyway, chiaroscuro is the interplay of light and shadow in a painting. Cezanne was trying to pull out all of the white and the black from his paintings and just let the color do the heavy lifting for creating plastic color. The idea that warm colors will advance towards the viewer and pop towards the viewer, popping this shape into the illusion of three-dimensionality, and that cool colors tend to recede in a composition, and the idea that some colors will advance while other colors recede opens up the three-dimensional illusionistic space, on a two-dimensional surface in a painting. So he's using really, really bright yellows in a lot of his highlights on the just to the left of center portion of each apple. Even this is a kind of a nasty highlight here, but it is a little bit more of an orangish red. And I think this painting was done in the 1870s, and I think that he hadn't still quite changed over, getting a lot of all of his white and black off of his palette, because I think I see some black in some of the shadows and in some of the contour lines around the outsides of the fruit, in some of the shadows that are the stem ends in the fruit. And this right here is a hot white highlight right up here in the top edge of that apple right there. So and there's a little white right there in that highlight too. So he's using white in here. We're trying to paint this painting without the addition of white or black, so that when we're painting this stuff, trying to get the bright high key colors, and the colors when they're really grouped together dots that are like 90% of one color dot, like these yellow orange dots right here in this part of this apple, or in this part of this apple, or right here in this highlight of this apple. Those are supposed to be the highlights that advance towards the viewer. Whereas on my painting, the blue violet and the blue green dots that are kind of in the background and in the shadows, they're supposed to recede away from the viewer's eye to try again to get these colors to separate, and the bright colors to advance towards the viewer, and the dark and somewhat neutralized colors to recede away from the viewer, and try to open up the illusion of three-dimensional spaces and shapes. So plastic shape is a shorthand version of saying a three-dimensional shape or a three-dimensional space. So plastic space and plastic shape, and the use of plastic colors is the idea of trying to make the colors pop and create that illusionistic three-dimensional effect. Now, having said all that, I'm just, I'm so boring sometimes, because I will just ramble on, talk and talk and talk, and not get busy here. So I'm going to continue painting. Mary's question was excellent. If you guys have other questions, please shout them out, or write them in the comments, or however you want to get your questions, comments, or concerns out and answered. And I'm going to continue painting and talk a little bit more about this as I do it. This red apple up here is a fairly red apple, and so I need to bring a lot more of my red orange into this apple to try to make that apple do its apple thing. It has a whole lot of red orange in the upper third of the apple. Just to kind of review, from my view of this painting, he's got 5 apples that are kind of reddish apples, and 2 apples over here that are green apples. And all of the apples have a huge bunch of yellowish, yellow-orange highlights in the center of all 7 of the apples. And that really helps to unify this composition together. He's using yellow and kind of yellow orange to kind of unify the whole composition. There's those colors are in all 7 apples, plus a lot of the pool of light that's in the foreground down here. And he's even got that kind of neutralized, but he's got it worked into the background too. There are brush strokes, choppy brush strokes that are, you know, kind of a yellow orange, even though they are getting blended in with green and, you know, kind of other warm colors that are tending towards browns over here and in this corner over here. But that's how, with the browns in the background, that's a really neutral color. And so that tends to knock that area of the composition back and makes the background recede, while the really warm foreground tends to advance towards the viewer. So that makes the whole tabletop tend to kind of like tip its edge forward. The forward edge of the tabletop comes towards us, while the back end of the tabletop goes away. Hey, I had paint on this thing, so I've been touching my image with paint, so I'm actually adding a little bit of my own interpretation to Cezanne's painting at this point. Let's get back to the painting though. So I'm going to pull a lot of this orange red into this painting, and sometimes you just have to close up the gaps between these dots to get rid of the white, because the white background of the paper in between the dots is really not doing me any good in this composition. It's, you know, the white is kind of distracting to me. I would really like to get this whole piece covered in nothing but dots, and then just use some deft, you know, interspersing of dots to kind of break up and kind of look for some interesting color shapes when I get to that point. So I'm just going to do a little bit more of this in this apple, and then I'm going to move on to the next apple and see what I can do. And I'm going to try to make this one look a little bit rounder. So I have to bring a couple more red dots over here to get this, to get the roundness of this apple, to get this curve to kind of come around and complete itself right there. Sometimes we have to really look at what's happening in the composition, especially around the edge of a round shape like an apple, to make that sure that that's a circle or close to a circle, so that it becomes, you know, convincing as a sphere. So that's, you know, that's a thing to kind of think about. Um, you know, he's painting wet and wet, and he's got a variety of reds in here. He's got some really orange reds and some very intense reds and some dull reds, some somewhat neutralized reds, and then especially in the shaded, you know, every apple, if the light source is coming in from this direction into the painting, there's a kind of a crescent shape of shadow on the right side of each apple, because the light is coming in from the left side. And so there's, I'm going to be using my darker colors, my blue greens and my blue violets, to kind of intersperse with some of the red dots and everything to try to get a shadow, a crescent shadow happening on the unlit side of each apple. So, you know, that's a thing, looking for the crescent kind of shape. And he does a really good job of breaking them into other kinds of shapes. So this crescent shape on this apple is not the same as what could have been the shadow over on this apple. This apple, you know, has a kind of a different shadowy kind of happening thing here. He's doing it different on every apple to make them interesting, to create variety in the composition and make each apple different. And yet each one is a sphere, and it is, you know, receiving light on the left side, and it's showing a little bit of shading and shadow over on the right side of each of the 7 apples. So each one is going to be just a little challenging and a little different to do that with. Since I've got my red, I'm just going to go ahead and try to fill in these red apples before I change colors to a green or a blue violet to play with some other parts of the composition. So this is the bottom side of this apple here, which is also kind of in the shadows. It's got a shadow cast on it from this apple, and it's got some kind of shadowy reflected stuff bouncing up from this shaded portion between the apples. So that's going to be kind of a dull place. I'm probably going to have a little bit of everything, a little bit of green and violet dots, blue violet dots in here too, to try to get the shaded portion of that part of the apple to be round and crescent shaped and doing its thing. Um, let's see. This is a pretty strong area of red that he's got established here. He went just chop chop with a couple of really strong red brush strokes right here. So I better kind of bring my red orange in here and do something similar to really establish that kind of a reddish choppy shape right there. This apple's really rough because um, the stem end where the shadow is in this apple is way up here at the top edge. You can't even see it there. How about if we, right at the top edge of this apple, there's just a really thin, oh, you can't see it unless you're looking at it in person. I'm sorry. Um, anyway, the stem end is up here. So I've indicated that in this apple, and I'm just gonna try to paint maybe just a little bit of outside contour line around the top of the apple, but right there, there's 3 dots of on my piece, blue violet right there to create the shaded portion of the stem end of the apple right there. Here's the stem end of the apple, the depression, the shadow on each one of these are these little, shaded stem end portions of the apple. And so shut up, James, and just keep painting. And so I'm just going to kind of fill in some of this stuff on this apple because this one doesn't have a whole lot of color yet in this place. I've got, I don't know, maybe 2 hours worth of painting into this painting. And I think I'm about 3/4 of the way done now with my painting. I'm going to be able to wrap this up pretty soon in the next couple of class sessions. And you guys will get caught up to me just as soon as you can. Painting. I was hoping that maybe over the weekend you'd be able to get all your materials together. If you still need to, come on over here and pick up the templates or instructions off of my table out here outside the west door of Eden Hall. But otherwise, print them out, do the best you can to kind of review these videos that I've done and kind of get caught up with the painting process. And you have to be, kind of good cheer and know that you might get lost. You might lose some of your shapes as you're putting these dots down. And sometimes you have to take a break, get away from it, and actually get literally away from it because when you're painting this close to things, my eyes are 18 inches away from the painting. Sometimes you lose the forest for the trees. So if you pin this up on the wall or tape this up on the wall and step back 10 feet, it will all come into sharp focus for you. And suddenly you'll be able to see exactly what's going on with the forms and where you might need to add a few dots of certain colors to try to get some, certain effects happening in your painting. And I'm blathering on and on here. Next week, I'll be happy if you guys would be so kind, as to just hold your painting up to the webcam. I can, give you pointers and some feedback and help you, out of the weeds if you feel like you're in the weeds with your painting. Even remotely. I mean, we can do this. So that'll be fun. Next week we'll start to kind of look at these things, and I want to wrap this project up next week. I've put a due deadline on it of Wednesday night at midnight, and then I've got an extension already on there that extends the thing until Saturday at midnight of next week, not this week. So you guys will have another week to wrap this painting up, and I'll be happy to be working with you on this throughout this process. Let's see, I'm just getting a few things going on here. What's going on with this last 2 apples? Is there any red in these last 2 apples? In the original painting, there's just really not too much red in these in these apples, and yet I may have to bring in the occasional dot of red because Seurat in his pointillism, he will do that, just a smattering of another color that is kind of unexpected, just to kind of help give some more depth and modulation of color and form in the apple. In fact, I've got this highlight right here. What would happen if I hit it like with 4 little dots of red right there? Does that make that highlight pop just a little bit more? If I have just a little bit more of the red orange kind of coming in here around the oddly shaped uh, stem end on that particular one, does that kind of help? And so we're always kind of looking for, what kind of helps. And the thing that I've been really noticing today are those crescent shaped or curving or comma shaped series of brush strokes or brush chops or whatever he does in his painting. Because if he's leading your eye through here with a certain kind of crescent shape, either a crescent shape of highlight going around one side of the apple, or a crescent shape of some kind, or a comma shape of some kind of low light or medium light on the opposite side of the apple, it's like it's yin and yang. It's like those two things are kind of coming together and caressing the two sides of the apple, and really kind of reinforcing the idea of the roundness of the apple. So since I noticed that, I'm just going to go ahead and try to make this a little bit more comma shaped right here. So that's the head of the comma, and then the tail of the comma kind of comes, rolling around this way. So I've got this comma shaped thing here, and more of a general crescent shape of highlight wrapping around the apple that way. And those two shapes kind of really help to reinforce the roundness and then the three-dimensional sphere shape of the apple. So we're going to want to look for those kinds of shapes. And if you can't see them, it doesn't hurt my feelings if you invent them. You can invent a kind of a crescent shape or comma shape that will kind of reinforce the idea of the roundness of that apple. And there's a whole lot of red in the middle of this apple. So I've still got just a little bit of red orange here, and I'm going to just go ahead and fill that in and let that dry, and then evaluate it and see how I did. That's what painting is all about. It is taking risks. It is throwing some paint on and letting it dry, seeing what you got, and then coming back and addressing it. Because if it needs changing, then as a painter, you can always just come in and paint a little bit more on top and change how things are working. And usually, you just kind of, with a little bit of a brush stroke here, or the addition of a piece of paint here or there, you're able to get a more complete feeling for the shape or the form that you're trying to paint. And so we're trying, in this very rudimentary way, kind of trying to feel what plastic color can do in a painting, how we can create the illusion of plastic shapes and plastic space in the painting, just with our 4-color tetrad. Okay, I'm gonna kind of quit for a moment here. I'm going to take this paint off of here and clean my brush off, the butt end of my brush, and I'm gonna just pause for just a second and kind of come back to you guys so that you can see my beautiful face. And let's see, it's Friday, and it's going to be, kind of a rainy, disappointing weekend starting today. I can't think of a better thing to do on a stretch of days like this than to paint or have some kind of a painting project going, because when you get into a state of flow with this, and you're painting, and you get music on in the background, and you kind of let go of all of the cares and concerns of the world while you're just kind of populating this painting with 10,000 dots, this can be quite a therapeutic, freeing kind of a thing. and time can get away from you, and you can look up and, an hour or two has passed, and you've just been happily, kind of painting and constructing your color scheme here and listening to music. And it can be the nicest way to spend time, especially on a rainy weekend. So it's a thing. And I wish you guys luck and want you to give it a try. Again, any questions, comments, or concerns that I can answer for you, don't hesitate to let me know. I'm opening up the chat box just to see if there's any chats in here. I don't see any comments typed in either. So this is on recording, and I'll be posting this recording. So I've done 3 different painting demonstrations, possibly 4, for this project. So there's lots and lots of material that you can go back to review. You can fast forward through the boring stuff and just get to the kind of the demonstration of trying to make shapes, just by kind of connecting the dots. Because in pointillism, we can't actually paint shapes. It's more like it's using our visual perception to connect up the dots, and suddenly form emerges when we're doing that kind of connecting of the dots. It's an interesting, diabolical, fun project because it seems simple enough, and yet it has just enough complexity that there's something there to challenge us, which I think is fun. That's a good place to leave it, I think. I've been doing this for about half an hour, and that's probably more than most of you guys can stand. So I don't hear any other questions or concerns. So I'm going to leave it there and wish you a good weekend. Happy painting to you. And we'll see where we're at on Monday in terms of finishing up this. I'm going to be finishing up my painting. You're going to be about halfway through your painting. And so we'll be able to compare notes and compare and contrast our paintings perhaps on Monday. So have a good weekend. I'll see you guys again on Monday afternoon. Bye-bye.